Hi guys, welcome back to another video. This is the first video, non-book review video I've done in a little while. I was watching a couple videos on the future, like talking about what the world's going to be like 2050, and another one was like up to the year whatever 4000 or whatever. So I just wanted to give a quick discussion on that, because in what I've been reading from like different philosophers recently, and as you know, I've been reading Locke and Kierkegaard and so on recently, and just obviously these are thoughts that I've had for a long time in different ways, and they shape themselves in different ways. Now, a lot of these future videos, these futuristic or estimating what the world's going to look like in 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, 100 years, they have a lot of common themes. One thing that keeps coming up is the development of fusion technology, and that's currently being worked on. Of course, they haven't solved it yet, but you know, obviously that's going to be a big deal when they finally develop fusion technology. So in terms of the broad spectrum of things, this is the question I'm pursuing here. This is the question I think about. Is it better, or is it just different? Is it something I like? So is it something to look forward to? So generally the videos will discuss different things. They'll talk about transportation, energy, the environment, space exploration, and developments in food and health. I don't think I repeated myself there. So in some of the things you can point to unequivocally and say, okay, definitely advances in medicine are good things, and they talk about developments in robotic limbs and artificial organs through 3D printing and all that stuff, and that's good. Okay, like you know, there's nothing wrong with, you know, replacing a, you know, malfunctioning heart or eyes or liver or whatever, and that's wonderful. Like, nobody would complain about that. The only thing, of course, is that what we found with medicine so far is that it's expensive, and I can't help but think it's always going to be expensive. So all these ideas like artificial limbs and replacement eyeballs and all that stuff, that's great, but we know that what history's taught us is that these are always things reserved for the wealthy, and I don't see how that's ever going to change. So when you develop the technology, it's not that it's going to improve the lives of everybody, right? And there's been some movies that talk about that, you know, the inequality and so on of that stuff. So it's not like a universal win for humanity in that case. And okay, so in terms of energy production, yeah, that's great. But like, and I'm a big proponent of, yeah, nuclear fusion's great, but nuclear fission right now should really be taking the place of other means. But of course, energy production again just means energy waste too, doesn't it? It means we do things that we wouldn't do otherwise, we wouldn't do before. And the question is, does that improve life? So let me give an example. One thing that people always talk about is the example of improving the speed of transport. So one case they always point out to is you can take a train from Los Angeles to San Francisco in a quarter of the time. Yeah, but why would you want to? Because every time there's an ability to do something, there becomes a requirement to do something. So how is the world better if everybody from Los Angeles can go to San Francisco much quicker? Like, how does that improve anything? Like, in a world where someone who lives in Los Angeles can also spend time in San Francisco, how's that a better world? I don't see how that's a better world. I've never been to Rome, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Hawaii, any of those places. And I can't say certainly that my life would be better if I were to be able to get to those places. I don't know. Imagine a world where transportation has become so easy and so cheap. How many people would be visiting the pyramids in Egypt, right? That would be a catastrophe if all of a sudden there's millions of people in Egypt looking at the pyramids. That's as an example, or millions of people traipsing around the rainforest in Brazil. Okay, so it's these things are, just because you can do them doesn't mean it's a better world. So Obviously, one of the things, of course, is space exploration, and that's an amazing thing. And it's very difficult for me to say that that's not a good thing, that doesn't make a better world. To me, it's just interesting, and I'm very biased in that regard. The iteration of philosophers over time and religious people is that basically you can go travel all around the world. Like, isn't that the famous phrase from St. Thomas of Kempis, or Thomas of Kempis? He says, basically, you go all these places, but it's like, did it improve your life? There's something very humbling about space travel and space exploration. I'm pretty sure now, I'm too old and too fragile that I'll ever leave planet Earth to go to the moon or Mars or anything. But perhaps my children will, I don't know. And that's a very humbling and a gratifying thing in that case. But everything can be used and everything can be abused. When you increase human power, doesn't mean you increase human happiness or human virtue, right? Human goodness. So, and let me look at another thing. One thing that's really bothered me in terms of these future videos is how these prognostications that impact human knowledge. So implants for connecting with other people. So like basically cell phones inside your brain, this kind of thing. To me, that's a horror. That's not a good thing. That's a horrible thing. And when you talk about improving human cognition and those things, you don't simply improve human cognition. By improving human cognition, the human being ceases to be what he or she was, right? And that's one thing that people fail to notice. One of the most absurd things in my mind is when people start talking about the interface of technology and cognition to the ultimate absurdity of downloading human consciousness and artificial intelligence. First of all, to my mind, there will never be artificial intelligence because cognition, as human beings know it, is time dependent and it's emotion dependent. Okay, I might have said this elsewhere, but I'll just reiterate this very concretely, and this came to the fore of my thoughts when I was looking at Locke, is that human beings don't think thoughts. Human beings feel thoughts, and the way they feel about their thoughts has a history to it. So you can't say that a machine will ever think a thought, right? Calculators don't think thoughts. They compute different quantities or whatever, and those aren't thoughts, okay? A thought is never Kleenex box, or a thought is never chair. A thought is how I feel about Kleenex boxes and my personal history with Kleenex boxes and my personal history with chairs, okay? It's a feeling. It's not just some kind of abstract proposition. So that's one thing that the scientists get wrong, is that they think that there's some kind of correlation between human cognition and bytes of information, okay? Human thoughts are not information. They're not the same thing at all. You can translate thoughts. Thoughts have information in them, but that's not what a thought is. So in terms of that, I think it's just plain wrong to talk about, number one, artificial intelligence, and number two, downloading human brains into machines or whatever and re-uploading them into robots and stuff. That's absurd. That's like, the brain is not that, and it's not reductive, and it doesn't produce propositions. And propositions are not ideas, okay? And I can go on and on about this at another time and place, and perhaps get into a bit more detail and have some illustrations, more examples. So even still, like, okay, expanding human life sounds like a good idea, but to be very honest, at this point, I don't really want to live that long. 70 years would be great. That'd be fine for me. I don't want to live to 100. I don't want to live to 150. And it's very interesting that I don't understand how these prognosticators don't understand the burden of time in cognition. Not simply, I'm not talking about the deterioration of brain tissue or anything like that. What I'm talking about is the weight of consciousness and being overburdened and basically overburdened by information, by experience, by repetition, so that there is indeed a fitting limit and a limit to what a human being would ever want to experience. And for a lot of people, that just seems to coincide with 70 or 80 years of age. I know that different people like, what's his name, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg, he's talked about immortality and stuff and all that. And to me, that's horrible. I would never, that's not something that I'm interested in. Yes, death is scary, and nobody wants to suffer, of course, in that regard. So nobody wants to suffer and so on. So, and there's one thing when, you know, you're born with a disease that's debilitating. You're born with a disease that, you know, that maybe someday can be cured, whether it's MS or epilepsy or diabetes or whatever, or crippled limbs or something. There's something to be said for that, and nobody would say that that's a bad thing, developing that stuff. So my point is that there's very little in terms of, and I love, you know, talking about developments, especially in terms of space and so on. But you know what? Let me leave a final thought, and it's this: cell phones have not improved our lives. Okay, smartphones, cell phones have, but smartphones haven't. And let me put it this way: people look at things more often now. Okay, we used to look at television sets, and we never carried television sets around with us. We were away from them most of the day, but now we carry these phones with us, these smartphones, and we're constantly connected and we're constantly looking at them. I like to read books. That's my thing. I like the imagination space inside, and I like learning things. I know that other people just simply like this preoccupation of, you know, whatever it is texting your friends, or it's looking at short little TikTok videos or whatever it is. To me, there's no sense to me in which that's improved the world. Gutenberg improved the world with the printing press. The internet's a wonderful tool, but I don't see how the advent of smartphones in the last 10 or 20 years has improved the world. Okay, so let's magnify that by 2, by 4, by 10, and see where that goes. So we get all these implants. We're constantly connected whenever we want to be. We were constantly amused and stimulated. Our brains are constantly stimulated by things we like, whether that's looking at pictures that we like, or being entertained by things we like, virtual reality, games, and all that stuff. But to my mind, that's good, but how's that any better than playing cards with your friends? How's that any better than kicking a ball around with your friends? These things are not qualitatively better. So, you know, hundreds of years ago, when whatever soccer was invented, I don't see anything that the Xbox has improved on in that regard. And I don't see really any way in which computers have improved on books in this regard. I have access to more information, and so I can find out specific things that I want to know about more easily, but is my overall quality of my knowledge better? For instance, will I ever be as smart, thoughtful, well-educated as David Hume, Soren Kierkegaard, Descartes, Kant? These people, you know, attained a certain mastery of the knowledge of their time, and even some of them, like I think of Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, were conscious of the fact that you can get too much information, and so there's a diminishment of quality when there's a superfluity of quantity, right? So this is the thing. I don't see a better world when I look outside and I see everybody's faces glued to their phones. You know, I see more options, more possibilities, but is it better? So obviously, I'm not a progressivist in the sense that I think technology and humanity is on an upward path of improvement. Not by any means, but of course, who wouldn't welcome improvements in biotechnology and so on? But there is a cost. There's a cost. Like I think even now we see it in terms of we're more accountable to government now. It's harder to be free of the government's hands because of cameras everywhere, because of surveillance state and tracking you, and whether that's in terms of your bank account information, your tax information, your business preoccupations. Everything is cataloged and knowable to the government. And so, how freely did so many people become willing to report their health status to the government, to shopkeepers, to restaurateurs, to airplane companies, and so on? That to me is worrisome. And we see that governments have not improved human lives in that regard. There's no sense in which the lockdowns are necessary violations of people's freedom of choice. You can point to things like Australia, and even here in Canada, there's been lots of infringements and infantilization of the citizenry. So as technology develops, it's going to become more and more intrusive and more mandatory, right? So these are things that I think philosophy needs to really come to grips with and say there's something to be concerned about here. But anyway, space exploration, healthier in terms of environmentally more healthy products, foods, energy production. These are all good things, but we don't just use the good part. We milk them for all they're worth. So it's not good enough that something can be done. It becomes, because it can be done, it has to be done, right? Anyway, just a few thoughts, and I'd invite you to, if you don't like what I said, to let me know. Put anything in the comments you like. And for me, I'm an old guy now. To me, the world got much better when, the printing press was created, and healthy food, good books, you're all set. So there you go. Not all technology improvements are a blessing, in that regard. They're part blessings and part curses, right? So anyway, think about that and maybe watch some of those videos that I'm talking about here. I'll put a link to some of the ones I was talking about, and if it seems interesting to you, check them out. Okay, thanks guys, and we'll be back to you real soon with some videos on some books. Reading Hume, reading Kierkegaard, reading Isaac Asimov. Okay, thanks guys, and hope you're having a good Christmas time.